Welcome to our August procurement talk. My name is Sarah Scudder, Chief Revenue Officer at Real Sourcing Network. We help companies make their packaging more sustainable. And about 2 years ago, my team and I got together and said, we absolutely love the procurement industry. How can we help bring leaders together to collaborate, to communicate, and to share ideas? So we launched something called the Procurement Talks. And we partnered with 4 awesome other companies that are doing really cool and innovative things. We used to do these in person around the country at different cities. And then this year we pivoted and decided to host them virtual once a month. So want to welcome everyone to our procurement talk and really excited to have you with us. In the comments, would love to have you introduce yourself. So if you want to tell us where in the world you are joining us from, and if you have a word to describe how you're feeling today, go ahead and put those in the comments. So I want to give a big thank you to our 4 sponsors that make this series possible and allow us to bring it to the procurement community globally at no cost. So all because of our fabulous sponsors. So I'm going to bring them each up for about a minute to tell us a little bit about their company and what they are doing to innovate in their space. So first up, I want to welcome Ken. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Ken Bumrick here from Worldwide Services, calling in from Southern California. So I want to say hi to everybody and thanks for joining. So what do we do here at Worldwide Services? So we are an IT provider of a maintenance solution program on any network equipment, such as servers, storage, routers, switches, things of that nature. So we come in and extend the life of your network when you have a built-in network in your telecom space. And we even have a software discovery tool. So if you don't know what you have, where you have, what it's running on, is it covered, is it not covered, we can help you with that first and then fill in the gaps on the back end. So it's a really cool program. It's great to be here. Please let me know if I can reach out to any of you guys. Thank you again, Sarah, for letting us participate in this. And this is a cool new platform. Lots of stuff going on that I'm seeing.
Awesome, Ken. Thanks for being with us today.
All right. And just for Genty there, go Hawks.
All right. Next up, we've got Manish. Manish, thank you so much for being with us today and always love partnering with your company. You guys are doing some really awesome things.
Thank you. Sarah, I have to say, even I'm excited about the platform. So let's start off by saying that. Good afternoon, good morning. Probably the easiest thing to say is good day to everybody listening across the globe. My name is Manish Senta. I am the Managing Director for TechWisen based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are a workforce solution provider that helps client in talent recruitment and also statement of work in 5 major technology. We are currently helping a lot of our clients understand the challenge of diversity recruitment in post-COVID. I don't know if I can say post-COVID, but semi-post-COVID world. If you want to talk about that, would love to connect. But looking forward to hearing from our speakers and learning more about procurement world. And thanks to Sarah for always keeping everybody's on the toe. Thanks, Sarah.
All right. Thanks, Manish. All right. Next up, we have my friend Eric joining us from New York today. Eric, super excited to have you and big fan of you and what your team are doing.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, good to see everybody. And this is pretty cool. Glad to see we're on LinkedIn Live. And so I'm with Rapid Ratings, and what we are is a SaaS-based algorithmic system enabling financial health transparency and predictive insights between procurement and supply chain risk managers and their suppliers. So we're busy transforming the way teams manage enterprise and financial risk on both public and private companies. And we're really unique because we go out and gather the private company financials directly from over 150 countries on behalf of our clients. And so we're growing the what we call the FHR network, Financial Health Rating Network, where clients can invite suppliers to self-rate and do this once and share it with many. So we're seeing a big uptake in that. Enjoy today's panel. Appreciate it being here.
Thanks, Eric. And how's the weather in New York? It looks a little overcast.
Yeah, a little hazy, humid, with August. So it's a nice day to, kind of guess, run through a fountain or something.
Thanks, Eric. Great to see you.
Yeah.
All right. And next up, we have Gabby. Gabby is our newest Procurement Talk sponsor. So super excited to have you and the team with us, and would love to have you tell us a little bit about your company and something cool that you guys are working on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us here again, Sarah. Love joining these every month. And I'm really excited about the new platform. I was like loving the pop-ups and everything. It's great. So I am here on behalf of Jagger. We are a SaaS-based full source to pay procurement solution. We are really focusing on ESG, the hottest sustainability term right now, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's environmental, social, and governance. So just focusing the second half of the year on ways that we can help our customers be more sustainable, find more sustainable vendors, just kind of change up everything from the procurement side. So it's our latest and greatest, and we're excited to hear what everyone has to say on the panel today.
Awesome, Gabby. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get to meet in person sometime this fall.
Hopefully soon.
All right. Have a good day. All right. So now we are going to kick off our panel discussion, and I am super excited to bring my friend Lamont up to stage with me. So Lamont is going to be moderating our discussion. Lamont is a very, very dear friend of mine. I've known him for several years, and I'll do a quick intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to him and bring the panelists on stage. So Lamont has been very, very busy moving, getting married, going on a honeymoon, and a grandpa. Did I forget anything else, Lamont, that's been going on in your life?
You know, I would probably forget myself because there's been so many things, but you got the majority of them right there.
All right. So Lamont, thank you so much for being with us. Really looking forward to our panel discussion today. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you and bring our panelists up on stage.
I appreciate it again, Sarah. Anytime there's an opportunity for me to participate in anything that you do is exciting. So now we begin. You know, I'm excited. You know, I was looking at the panelists, and just the backgrounds are so diverse. And so what I'm going to do first is to have each one of them introduce themselves. So we're going to go ladies first, and we're going to have Jenty come on and introduce herself just briefly in terms of organization and just anything else that you'd like to add as well. Jenty.
Folks, my name is Jenty Vandertag, and I'm from India. Here 7 years ago, and started off my career in sector, and I've been an individual as procurement of Santa Claus. And I not choose procurement, chose me, and I'm glad I made it and enjoy my career as well as me. The 49ers after I retired, and enjoying my new recent transfer at the 49ers, and look forward to having a good comment today.
Appreciate it. Now we're going to go to Jeffrey.
Of course, while I'm joking, good afternoon, good morning today. I'm Jeffrey Luft. I am the managing director of Fedora Consulting, which is a boutique solo consulting practice that I run out of New Jersey. I have, I hate to say 40 plus years of doing things that are supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, product related. I look at the supply chain process from what I call the end, the very beginning to the very end. And you can't see my hands, they're going like that. On the far left is the concept of a product or service, and on the far right is delivery. And as I'll talk about later on, I think it's our right as supply chain and procurement people to earn our way to the table and to coach our internal partners and clients on how to be more successful. On a personal note, I know some of the members know this. I am a minority owner of an NFL football team. So we have 2 teams represented on the call today.
Thank you. And Jeffrey, I apologize if you get arrested for mentioning that you've been in it for 40 years, because that means that you would have started at the age of like 5 or 6. So, just
3 at the age of 3.
Very nice. Thank you. Brent.
Yes, I'm Brent Danskoik with Park, Ohio. I lead the supply chain procurement function across the holding company. We operate 90 businesses in 20 countries. I have been in industry for almost 40 years, so Jeff, don't feel so bad. Worked in automotive, consumer products, heavy truck, construction equipment, and so forth. And I'm in Cleveland, Ohio now, and proud West Virginia grad, so hopefully the Big 12 can figure out what they need to do.
Appreciate it. And I got to be careful because we've got 2 Brents on the call. So I probably should have said, Brent P versus Brent V. So we're going to go to Brent P now.
Thanks, Lamont. I took a quick guess there and decided just to be quiet and let Brent V go instead of me. So Brent Pericopy, I'm the young one on the panel. I don't get to say that often. I've only been doing procurement and supply chain work for about 25 years now. With a couple side stints in P&L management. I'm currently in transition and doing a little bit of consulting work, but really throughout my career, I've worked across a huge swath of different sorts of industries. Most recently in food manufacturing, but prior to that, I worked in energy and retail. I've worked in indirect spend, direct spend, and I've also built out the Center of Excellence. Really, throughout my career, I've managed most aspects of supply chain, everything from, creating the vision for the department, implementing strategies, processes, policies, design physical distribution networks, plan, purchase, controlled inventory, IT, really kind of seen the structure soup to nuts, but really, really enjoy the opportunity to talk about procurement and, transforming and building the function. So thank you.
Appreciate it. So we all know that 2020 was a transformative year in many ways. And one of the things that we don't hear as much as we should about, which is why I'm excited to be on this call, is really the impact of 2020 on procurement. And so what we saw in 2020 was more of an awakening for corporations to really fully understand the value of procurement. And so again, for us to be on this particular webinar is giving us an opportunity to really talk about, just for your respective areas, how the impact has, really benefited you in many ways. So the first thing I want to get into before we get into some of the specific questions, is really what drove you to the world of procurement. So just real quickly, my background is in procurement. And so for me, what drove me into procurement was more so, just having the ability to be able to positively impact an organization. When you talk about cost savings, when you talk about change management and things like that. I love the negotiation part of it as well and the interaction with sales. So for each of you, what drove you into procurement? So again, we'll start with Genty on this one. Genty, I think we're having some audio issues.
Yes, I can barely hear you, and I missed the last few minutes. I'm sorry. If you can go to another panelist, I'm going to try to move to a different location. Sorry, in Silicon Valley, I'm going through this. But
not a problem. Not a problem. What about the rest of the panelists? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. So Jeffrey, we're gonna go to you. So what drove you to this world, this exciting world of procurement?
So I come out of the telecom world. I spent 30 years in what affectionately we call the Baby Bell family. I am a Judge Green baby. So I was a part of AT&T prior to its first divestiture, which is when the phone companies broke up and became less of a monopoly and more of a utility. So you had that's when MCI and Sprint and the others came in. And through a number of early marketing roles, I found myself managing product and a P&L line. Well, when you own the product and you own the P&L, you want to make sure that everything's getting done right, from manufacturing to packaging to transportation. So for me, it was a natural flow out of product management into supply chain. And I look at all of it. So it's not necessarily just the procurement. And for me, it's making sure that customers get what they want. You know, I like to think that for the most part, people on this call do, but most of the public does not understand what supply chain is. So, you know, when there's no milk on the shelf, right, they all yell and blame Al Roker because they didn't talk about the storm. But in general, when those things get delivered, when the Christmas toys or whatever the products or services are, as supply chain leaders, and I know I do it, I pat myself on the back because I said, yep, we were successful. We made the end user happy.
Appreciate that. So Brent P., we're actually going to go to you. So what about yourself? What drove you into this world of procurement?
I think like many procurement people, I kind of accidentally fell into it. So I graduated from school in the early 90s and really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I guess through a little bit of luck, I ended up at Sears in Canada at that point in time in a management training program. And kind of for the first time, I was working in their head office, and I was amazed by this, you know, vast organization that I had never thought about. So, you know, goods, I guess, as I grew up, magically appeared on store shelves, and I never understood anything existed beyond that store. And you know, I got lucky, I guess, and ended up in this career, and have really spent the last 25 years in a variety of aspects. But it all started there, and I really enjoy it because it's the challenge. Every day there's something different, and the space is growing and changing, and you can really be creative and think about it. And as Jeff said, we've got a huge impact on the P&L, and that kind of gives us meaning, which I think is really important.
I love that. What about Brent V? What about yourself? You're on mute.
Oh, there. Somehow I unmuted myself. I don't know how I did that. I actually started out in the world of CPA, in a CPA firm. And after a year, it became very apparent to me that I wasn't cut out to work in an interior office from 7 to 7 and go home in the dark every day during tax season. So I changed careers and ended up at a company called Dana Corporation, which is a conglomerate back in the day of known for a lot of different things around automotive. And I was in a finance role, and I started exploring why things we were buying were all different prices across the company. And somebody said, you ought to start managing some of this for us. So I kind of got anointed to move into an area where a very decentralized company with 36 divisions buying a lot of common things work together to get a better value. So not necessarily just pricing, but better service, better support, and all those things. And I ended up being one of the procurement leaders at Dana at a very young age. And I was like 26 running around with a bunch of 55-year-olds that, quite frankly, then didn't get it. So that's kind of how I got here. And I've enjoyed the interaction, and every day is a little different.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I do not like monotony. And so that's the beautiful thing about procurement, is that you don't have that regardless of what you're purchasing. Genty, welcome back. Sorry for the technical challenges. We've all been there before, especially in the world of, just the virtual meetings daily. So the question that I asked, and again, I don't know what was heard, what wasn't, but I'm just curious to know what brought you into the world of procurement? What got you motivated to pursue a career in procurement?
So thank you. I actually was at City of Sunnyvale, and I worked in various departments. And when I was at the Sunnyvale Public Library, I was put in charge of acquisitions of procuring all the books and the audiovisual materials and stuff. And the then procurement manager saw me as a procurement liaison and said, "You will make an awesome buyer because you ask all the right questions." And that started my journey back in 1998, where I was in charge of acquisitions of all the goods and services for City of Sunnyvale as one of the junior buyers. And then during the dot-com bust, I actually moved over to the private sector for about 6 months. And then I started working at the County of Santa Clara as an IT procurement manager. And soon after 2 years, I became the head of procurement and handled $2 billion worth of operations. And somehow this profession fell on my lap and I ran with it. Anytime there was an opportunity for me to utilize my skills and expand my network, I was in the right place at the right time to augment my career and move it forward. So that was 30 years in the public sector, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learned quite a bit.
So, Jenti, we're going to stay with you for a second because you talked about your experience in the public sector. How did that help you and influence you in how you approach your current work with the 49ers?
Yeah, so when I started off in the public sector, I was an individual contributor for almost 15 years. And I actually had a really good mentor, and I laid the right foundation in learning, all about policies and processes and technology. So coming to the 49ers, there's no real procurement department per se, but actually everything is decentralized, and everybody can procure ad hoc, and then finance pays the bills. But because the 49er, the stadium is owned by a public entity, and we have to follow some public procurement laws and policies to ensure that the public and private funds are utilized effectively, I was brought in. So my background was very, very unique, where I was not only an individual contributor, but also as being the head of procurement of a very large county with $2.5–3 billion in procurement operations. And I was able to lead the organization related to people, process, and technology. That sort of gave me a background where I could come into an organization which is extremely well known and popular, but when it comes to a public-private partnership, to wear that individual hat on and go back all the way to 20 years ago to say, how do I actually inculcate that business of a regulated industry in a sports and entertainment arena, but at the same time bring forth all of my interpersonal skills, my background, my networking skills, and all the stuff to engage in an environment which is completely different from the public sector and make a difference in an organization. So it's being again a right place at the right time, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it being an individual contributor. I've been with the 49ers for 2 years, but I just took on the role as a head of procurement. I'm the only procurement person as a head of procurement, but I'm looking forward to transforming again a people, process, technology in a new environment. And I'm very proud to be here. Yeah.
Well, I wish we could have used your procurement skills in Chicago to get us a better quarterback when you guys were killing us back in the days. Yeah. So Brent P., we know that COVID, again, we alluded to 2020, and a major element of 2020 obviously was COVID. And so, clearly we can all probably talk about stories where we were directly or indirectly impacted by it. So there's an old saying that says no crisis should go to waste. How have you been able to actually leverage COVID?
Thanks, Lamont. So I guess the last company I was at, prior to COVID, they really operated with a large unmanaged risk related to supply disruptions. The focus there was probably like many procurement organizations, how do we save money? How do we reduce costs? And when disruptions happen, you chase them. And I think as I had been there, I did a lot of root cause analysis and really did recognize that we did have this unmanaged risk. The challenges I kept kind of bringing up to the organization was the cost of risk doesn't show up anywhere on a P&L. So it's a really hard, I guess, challenge to get resourcing put around managing risk and cost of risk. And they didn't really fully believe it because where we had disruptions in the past, we'd always been able to chase it and deal with it. And so the attitude was, hey, we've always done it in the past. Why is the future going to be any different? And I think really, COVID taught us the future can't.
I think Brent is frozen, at least on my end. Am I alone with that? Maybe it's me. Okay. So we're going to go, Brent, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. So we'll come back to you a little bit. But we're going to go to Jeffrey. We all heard about the Evergreen and the blockage in the Suez Canal. There've been port backups in LA, Long Beach, and for what seems to be forever. So is this the future of shipping? So in your opinion, how do we prepare for this? So I'll turn that over to you.
The past 24 months have been rather unique in the global supply chain. What happened in the Suez Canal with the Evergreen is an anomaly. The Panama Canal, the port of Newark in New York, as well as other ports, are digging deeper to be able to allow these ever-growing tanker ships in. It's now not unusual to see 15, 16, 18,000 containers on a boat coming in across the ocean. LA Long Beach has been a challenge for a while, partially due to some labor slowdowns, as it is a union shop. But I want to share a picture just to sort of, and I hope this will work. First time since we're doing this. Okay, tell me if that comes up. So are you able to see that, Lamont?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So what I was attempting to show is what the situation is at the global ports. So let me try that now. And any better? There we go.
Like it's coming up.
Okay.
Yes, there we go.
So this is the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach. Currently, according to the port's website, there are 24 container ships in dock. Those are the ones right here. I can count another 32 just miles off the coast. If I pull back, everything that's in yellow is a container ship. And you now get to see how congested the waterways are globally with cargo that's attempting to come from, let me pull back a little more, from China and Asia into the US, whether it's going into LA here or it's coming through the Panama Canal, the Suez over here, right, it's everybody's nightmare traffic jam. And it's happening everywhere. At some point, it has to lighten up. But I think the challenge that we have is that it's going to take a while for us to get back there. How long? I don't know. We are partnering with vessel companies. We're partnering with ports. But there's always something that seems to happen. One of the very large vessel operators in the past 6 months has had 2 vessels overturn in the Pacific Ocean. One vessel was near to Japan, and that only lost, I don't know, a couple of hundred containers. One that was closer to Vancouver lost about 1,200 containers. And when I say lost, I mean, literally, the container fell off the ship and went straight down. When you stack up that high, something's got to give. The climate change affecting the winds, affecting the water, it's all just unheard of. I think all we can do, back to the original question, is work closely with our business partners and make sure that everyone's always up to date. Everyone knows what's going on. The one thing that all business leaders hate is surprise. Oh, we forgot to tell you that we didn't get on the ship. Well, if I give you notice, then at least we can manage those expectations and reset. It's going to be probable that some people are going to turn to air cargo, which is what you do when you're in the crunch. Problem there is there's only so much space on a cargo plane. You know, you can dump the passengers, but you can still only get 30 or 40 pallets if you stack high, and then you got to worry about weight. So stay tuned. It will get better, but work with your partners and pay attention to it, because again, it's not something that when you see the picture, it really stands out. And I think Larry Lung posted the link so you can see the global vessel traffic at vesselfinder.com.
Thank you.
First
off, I'm a visual person, so it was great to see that. It also, I'm sure those that have lived in the cities, it probably reminds you of rush hour, a little bit, seeing all of that congestion. So it's just scary that that's on the waterways. So, we're going to go to Brent V now. So you talked earlier about, just your experience at Park, Ohio. And so for those that don't know, it's an industrial supply chain logistics behemoth. And so, I want to ask you, in terms of, what concepts did Park Ohio Industries implement to manage the supply chain? We've been talking about supply chain challenges and things of that nature. So what about at Park Ohio? What have you done to manage that?
Okay, I'm unmuted this time. We've implemented several different activities. First and most important was a 7-step sourcing process so that we had all the stakeholders involved in what was going on to make a decision. Prior to that, the company is totally decentralized. Everybody's got their P&L to manage, and there was little coordination across the businesses. So by bringing in a 7-step sourcing process, it allowed us to work together and get engineering, operations, finance to buy into the decision, which then led us to using a 5-step implementation process that everybody could follow and understand how to make it happen. Because early on, we'd get done with the sourcing and everybody'd go, okay, we're done. Well, the hard part is really implementing the change of suppliers or the rationalization of the supply base. We also put in some risk management tools to help us understand where our risks were with those supply chains. And we did a financial strength review of companies that we were dealing with. And, it could be as simple in some cases of pulling a D&B and going through that, or using other financial tools that are out there. But we also started doing a lot of benchmarking around the Cleveland area. Next door to us is Parker Hannifin, a Fortune 250 company that I knew the CPO there. Sherwin-Williams is another large entity in town that we started benchmarking activities with them. Lubrizol, another large manufacturing company in the area, and we started comparing notes across that to understand where we could improve. We're basically a $1.5 billion outfit today, and that was prior to COVID. So hopefully things get back to normal. We'll get back on our growth pattern. But one other thing we did with the whole entity is we formed councils to look at spend categories, because everybody thought they were doing the best they could. And the easiest one we got a hold of first was office supplies. So we were buying locally in some cases in Newport, Arkansas, which is a town of about 5,000 people, and other people using, Staples, Office Depot, or whatever. When we brought that all together, we still figured out that our buying power was pretty small. And so we found a consortium at that time that was Cleveland based. I can't think of the name of it now, but it molded into one of those other bigger outfits, and we got dramatically better pricing and service through that. So the council concept has really helped us manage across the supply chain from what we should be doing and those different spend categories. So what works for travel doesn't necessarily work for MRO.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing I love, first of all, thank you very much for that. And the thing I love about councils is that they mitigate risks. And so now I want to talk about risks. And so Brent P., why is risk such a difficult conversation?
Thanks, Lamont. And I guess I'm back. Today doesn't seem to be a great day for anyone's internet. So I've traveled through the house and found another room and hope the Wi-Fi is a little better here and holds up. I think when I think about risk, the biggest challenge with risk is it's just so diverse. And so when you say risk to someone, they're thinking about risk in their own world, in their own department, in their own company. And you're often not talking about the same thing. So, variation for us, mostly it's going to be supply chain risk, but maybe it's quality, maybe it's corporate social responsibility. There's reputation, there's cyber, there's regulatory, there's the physical damage to our own facilities from weather or fires or those sorts of events. There's legal risk, and it goes on and on and on. Generally, when you look inside the company, no one owns that whole scope. Even if you have a risk department, they often don't really own that whole scope of risk. And then as you look, there's kind of different levels of management that are standard industry to industry. So if you're doing direct spend, it's actually relatively common to be single sourced on a lot of your suppliers. And it has to do with logistics, cost of transportation, variability from one manufacturing process to another. So you tend to be single sourced. But if you look elsewhere in the enterprise, it's really rare to see an IT provider that doesn't have a secondary data center. It's very rare to go to a BPO, to a call center operation, and not run two parallel call centers. So as we have this risk, we tend to think about in our own world. So in the direct spend, hey, there is no other options. In a BPO or IT environment, hey, everyone's always got two sources of supply. It's just so basic and standard. So there's the different types of risks, there's the different environments. And so within procurement, it often comes down that it's not core to our job. It's there, it's one of the 10 things we're looking at, and then it becomes core when an event occurs. And then I think finally there's a cultural aspect about risk. So having a conversation about risk tends to be negative. What can go wrong? And we live in a culture where we're encouraged to be as positive as possible. And so every time you're the guy that constantly brings up, risk, and you're the negative Nelly at the table, it's never going to happen. It's not happened in the past. And so when you kind of take all those factors together, you tend to end up with an attitude of, it's not going to happen. We've got it covered. And stop being negative. Let's focus on the good things, and that really makes it tough to have a good, solid, real conversation about risk.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that, and when you start focusing on governance, that's typically when you get into those conversations about risks as well. And so, in speaking about governance, Genty, Sherry Spinks in the Procurement Foundry, she coined a phrase, engagement over governance. So how does this apply to how you've crafted your career in procurement?
A great question. I'm glad you're asking me this after Brent talks about risk. So coming from the public sector, governance and following all the rules and regulations is like the ultimate, right? And engagement, you expect the customer to follow everything that the procurement officer says because we have to follow all the rules. So in my experience, when I was at the County of Santa Clara, we had a hybrid model of a centralized procurement where we did all of the goods and services, and we decentralized all of our professional services. So there was always this conundrum of getting it done versus getting it done right. And when the customer is king and wants to get everything done and their operations, and procurement is always following the rules and not following the timelines, there's always a tug of war, which one rules over the other. Unfortunately, 20 years ago, we were called the black eye of the county because HR and procurement were so rules driven, and we forgot about the customer and their operations. So asking me this question brings me forth now to the 49ers and what I'm required to do. And I'm in a new vertical, and I'm supposed to be the procurement person everybody goes to, and it's a new function. And being a public-private partnership with one of the public agencies enforcing all of the rules and regulations, thou shalt do it this way, I have to find a happy medium to how to engage the customer and entice them to understand what we have to face in order to run a public stadium with football as the main, focus as our bread and butter, and at the same time keep everybody engaged to procure the goods and services in a way that they feel satisfied. So it has been a big eye opener for me because I'm new to football and I had to learn that. And in order to bring forth a new department, I have to engage everybody, the customer, the public entity, legal, IT, risk management, and accounting and budget and finance, right? So I feel like without having that engagement, enforcing governance is almost impossible. And also having that, the balance between both. In the public sector, anybody who has the position to enforce rules had a say in the matter, which everybody had to follow, and automatically the attorneys supported us. I actually attended a conference at the Harvard Kennedy School of Business, so for the public agencies, and it was creating collaborative solutions, innovations in governance. And I happened to use that model to actually emulate, even though I'm not so proficient in the football industry or sports and entertainment industry, how do I engage all my customers, like the engineers who are running the stadium versus the special events people who have to engage outsiders to bring in more revenue in, the marketing people who have to buy all the materials, and mostly guest services. The football season starts like in a week on Saturday. We have to buy all of our uniforms and the promotional items, and have training for 700 to 3,000 playmakers who are going to be serving the guests in the stadium. So without engaging and talking about the underlying business need and enforcing governance is a lose-lose situation. And I'm really, really happy that my background in County of Santa Clara, where I had run a county hospital acquisitions, buying for jails and parks and IT and general administration, helped me bring forth that understanding. And I'm a people person, and I was able to bring forth the model of seek to understand before you're understood, and work with the people to make it happen. So whether it's the risk or, Jeffrey brought about all of these supply chain issues that they're going through because of the pandemic and stuff, we're going through the same thing. We cannot buy any of these items on time. We have to find diverse suppliers. So being all constantly engaged and working with the team is actually making things happen. So procurement isn't the front runner of making many of these changes happen right now. And it's even more important to be focused on the vision and the values of the organization rather than enforcing rules and making that like the number one priority to enforce in the procurement function.
You know, Genti, you first of all, you said a lot of great things, and one of the things that caught me was the fact that you understand the need to, from a procurement perspective, to be engaged with the entire organization, especially in the role that you have, where you're the only procurement person. You have to be engaged, but you also can't you can't put yourself in a position where you are a roadblock. And so we're going to talk about that now. So Jeffrey, supply chain teams and specifically procurement teams, as we've been talking about, are often viewed as the roadblock within many businesses. And so you have many internal partners that will work outside those lanes because they see they feel like there's a roadblock, and then the processes have to be established because they often think that they know better. So how do we change this and then start to brand ourselves into a positive light?
Lamont, thanks for the question. I think that feeds off well onto what Genti talked about and what Brent talked about, whether it's risk and how we look to mitigate risk. In one of Genti's opening comments, how everyone at the organization was making their own purchases. And the value that we as a supply chain team, procurement team, bring is that we can see everything and we look across the board. I was in a business once, multi-billion-dollar business. We had 45,000 SKUs. And we were tasked by leadership to cut that down to 15,000 SKUs in year one and 7,500 SKUs in year two. And I'm sure most of the people know, you know, the tail keeps getting longer and longer for the SKUs that you use very infrequently, but you have to keep. So one of the things that we discovered as we were looking at this project was that every product house in my business was sourcing their own RJ45 cable. For those of you who are not familiar, that's the cable that you plug into the wall and you plug into your computer or your modem, your router for connection. And I had 7 or 8 different product houses buying the same product from the same supplier who was creating unique SKUs. And we put a stop to that because one of the things that it doesn't allow you to do is to get volume discounts. You know, it's Joe's making a purchase of 10,000 and Sally's making a purchase of 20,000, as opposed to supply chain procurement making a single purchase of 30,000. How much of a discount can you give me on a 30,000 item order? And once you explain to the internal stakeholders and your external business partners that what we're there to do is to look at the risk, is to go down, I like to say 3 or 4 levels deep. Brent P. Referenced it as the nervous Nelly. But somebody always has to be thinking, what if? What happens if? Suppliers have manufacturing problems. So with some of the weather recently, component suppliers, so those tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that our primary partners are using, there's a fire in the facility. There is an earthquake. There's flood damage. Well, how are you preparing to be resilient in that case? Where are you going to second source it? Why can't I go out and buy this on my own? I've been doing this for 5 years here. Well, because we can get you the same part and we can get it for you cheaper. It will be the exact same part. We're not going to say, okay, we're going to get you almost as good, but our talent is looking at the big picture and knowing how to move it through. So it's a hard sell to business leaders. It's a hard sell to finance or sales who wants immediate gratification and wants to see that turnaround very quickly. But once you're in our world of supply chain procurement logistics, you know that takes much more than just picking up the phone to place the call. And when we have conversations with our partners, when we get them to realize that this is what it takes, then the business is more accepting and moves forward together. An example I like to use is anywhere in the supply chain. It could be procurement, but let's just take 3 steps in the supply chain. Steps number 5, 6, and 7. We'll start with step 6. That's being done by Henry. Well, Henry is both an internal customer to the person in step 5 before him and an internal supplier to step 7 after him. So it behooves the internal teams to know what processes and roadblocks their predecessors have and to negotiate with them. So if step 6 needs 3 items to come out of step 5, and you're not having that discussion, well, then step 5 is just going to do it however they've been doing it. But if Henry goes to Joe, who works in step 5, and says, I need these 3 things, and Joe says, well, damn, I can give you those first 2 right away. I don't have to do anything. I can just pass that along. But this 3rd thing you need, I have to do some work in order to generate it for you, but I can move it up in the process so I can give it to you in my step 5 out of 10. Great. Now, when there's a hiccup, we can go back and say, hey, we had a problem with this deliverable, and here's why, and everyone's on the same page. But it's incumbent upon, going back to the guy or gal in the middle, to look forward and to have a similar discussion with his or her internal customer to say, these are all the things that I and my team do. What is it that you take from that to kick off your piece of the process? And when you end up in a corporation, or whether it's a large team or a small team, and people say, that's not my job, I'm staying in my lane, they need to sometimes be reminded that there are usually and probably 3 parts of their employee compensation. One is the salary. 2 might be an individual performance bonus. But 3rd, and more likely, is a performance based on the overall corporate attainment of an objective or a goal. So if you're telling me that's not your job, and you're only here to do what's in this little lane, you're telling me that when the business succeeds, you don't want that bonus. So you've got to be aware, and you've got to be working together as a team.
You know, Jeffrey, the thing I love about that is that in order for us to be aware and work together, there's a sense of elevation that has to happen in terms of what that procurement function is. And so, Brent V., I'm going to ask you a question about that elevation. So what concepts did Park Ohio Industries use to elevate the sourcing process?
Well, we've focused on 4 things. RFX standardization, what we call the 3-legged stool concept, market intelligence, and futurization. And I'll walk through each one of those. So if we looked at the RFXs that were going out, so that could be a request for proposal, request for information, request for quote, so on and so forth, there was no common way of going about that. So if you had 5 individuals sending out one of those, some were very good and some were not so good. So we came up with a standardized, these are the things that should always be included in that. And you can always add to it based on the area that you're working through. Second was the 3-legged stool concept, because a lot of folks were measured on cost savings. That's really not the right measure. You really want to measure it on a 3-legged stool, which the first up is, are you getting the level of service that you need? Be that engineering services, be it accounting, be it whatever those service type things are. The second is quality. And everybody go, well, the quality of the part. No, it can be the quality of the accounting. I can tell you in IT, we have one supplier today that we're moving away from because they can't bill us correctly. They have great pricing, but dealing with all the billing issues every month is just taxing. And then the third is the total cost of ownership model, which gets into your pricing. If you can't do the first two, the pricing really doesn't matter. So that was a complete change of thought process. Is, well, I can get the pencil cheaper, down the street. Well, it's not about that. It's about looking at what's the cost related to getting that pencil. So another thing that was looked into in the total cost model is if you got to ship something, yeah, I can buy it for $1 in California and ship it to Ohio, or I could buy it for $1.10 in Ohio. And when you throw the simple freight cost onto it, all of a sudden $1 isn't cheaper in California. $1.10 is cheaper here, because then you can look at the inventory you got to carry to bridge that gap. So there was things put in place around that to help measure those things. And then market intelligence was a huge piece. So understanding truly where the market is was a big deal, and we can focus on direct materials or indirect materials in that concept. Right sizing the supply base. To Jeffrey's point earlier, maybe it's buying the same thing and we're buying it in 10 places because we're buying it locally. You combine all that leverage of all those different quantities, and all of a sudden you can drive a better value. Maybe the price doesn't get better, maybe the service does. Maybe they can ship you from 3 different distribution points, so your freight cost comes down. Things of that nature. And then at our size company, in a lot of cases, we don't buy enough to be able to really leverage a supplier from a price perspective. So joining a consortium was a huge deal to help us. We did that around travel with rental cars and hotels. We did it around office supplies, and there's many others that we looked into those things and found value in that. But we also reached out and aligned ourselves with subject matter experts. In our company, there is only really 2 corporate functions that are led from corporate, and that's HR and myself with supply chain procurement. There's no COO, CMO, or those types of activities there to lead that. There's no CIO or CISO or any of those folks. We brought in subject matter experts around those councils to help us set direction. So like in IT, we standardized on email a few years back on Office 365, which then led us to using Teams as collaboration and not all these other programs, be it, everybody thinks of Zoom today, but Zoom's really more than a video platform, the WebEx and all those others, which led us into looking at our UCaaS spend category, what we should be doing there. And we found out we're using 82 different suppliers to get dial tone. When we're done with this project, we hope to be down to 1 from that perspective. But futurization was really the thing that hit us in the last 18 months when COVID hit, because that really changed the world. And, a lot of people use the Uber example of, hey, 6 years ago, in New York City, you had a medallion that was worth $1 million. Uber comes in, all of a sudden that medallion for a cab in New York City isn't worth very much. So we really started looking into what's the future going to be? What's going to be a disruptor that could change the direction we're going? So let's try to anticipate that. Is that looking at 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road? So maybe that doesn't really apply to ductile iron castings or steel tubing, but does it apply to our IT infrastructure? Does it apply into industrial gases? And if you look at that, for example, there's been tremendous consolidation in that area. And if you're dealing with rare earth materials, which we do, the same thing there. What is going to change with all the battery type activities, the electric vehicles, everything going that way? Where do you want to be positioned from that perspective? So those are the things that we've really delved into, and our councils have helped us, again, as I mentioned, to make that more of a activity around leadership of that spend category than just saying I'm going to buy it better. So the IT council really became the CIO of the company, or the CTO of the company, because they started leading from those business segments.
Well, I can guarantee with the councils and the work that you guys are doing with the consolidated group purchasing efforts, quality is always going to be at the top of that list in terms of an element to include in the process. So, and when we talk about quality, one of the questions I'm going to pull from the audience was, and this, anybody could volunteer an answer, but what is the major criteria for procurement people to engage suppliers apart from quality? So I know we focused a lot on quality. Brent, you actually just stated some of the other elements as well. But again, so what's the major criteria for procurement people to engage suppliers apart from quality?
Well, I think one of them is to make sure that you have an open dialogue with your suppliers. In the past, when I've worked with suppliers globally around the world, 12, 13-hour time zone difference, even though I'm the paying customer, what I would do is say, okay, this week our team meeting, which includes everybody around the world, is at 10 o'clock a.m. in the States, 10 p.m. in Asia Pac. The following week, it's 10 a.m. in Asia Pac, it's 10 p.m. here. So it's showing respect that they are a part of the team no matter where they are. The other thing is to reinforce with them that no news is bad news. If you don't tell me that there's a problem because you're going to try to fix it on your own, then I am going to assume the worst. If you tell me we're having a problem on manufacturing line X with these 3 widgets, and here's what we're doing to fix it, then I can rest that you are working efficiently and effectively to A, let me know, and B, solve the problem. So we do that through QBRs, we do that through emails, we do it just through, and now with video chat, we get to see our partners. So being able to engage them. Anybody else?
Well, when we go to a TCO model, it depends on what you're sourcing. If you're sourcing, a service, is different than sourcing a widget and things of that nature. But you put those different things that are cost drivers into that. So the short answer to the question is, what are your cost drivers in that spend category or that activity that you're sourcing? And that's what you really have to focus on. And some people don't think about cost drivers being paying an invoice. What's your back office cost? Those are things that you get into. Can you consolidate payments? Does a supplier do ACH, or will they accept an ACH payment? I mean, I still got suppliers that require a check every week. Well, I can tell you where they're going to be in another year. They're either going to figure out how to do an ACH, or because we figured out the cost of writing a check and vouching it and doing all that, several $100 a check. So you got to get into the cost driver piece of it. That's the way I would sum it up, simply for whatever you're trying to source, what drives cost.
For me, I can think of kind of 5 or 6, depending on kind of how you classify it and break it down. So quality, absolutely is part of the conversation. Risk needs to be part of the conversation. It's really hard to understand, what's going to happen in their factories or their suppliers' factories without having that risk conversation. Part of that then is market intelligence, and I don't know if market intelligence is its own subset, but that market intelligence is both what's going on in the industry in terms of supply, structure, assurance, but also links to the next category, which is innovation. So what's new? Either what's new if you're buying IT or new functionality in IT, or what's new if you're buying, say, direct spend. What's the newest version of steel? Supply assurance would be another category. That is, how full is their factory, and how do you get as much as you need out of their factory? Right now, we're living in a world where a lot of factories are beyond 100% of capacity. And a lot of that conversation is getting your fair share or more than your fair share of that supply. And then, the last conversation is price. And, I think what Brent said, there's a lot of subcomponents to price. but it kind of, so summarize it: quality, risk, innovation, market intelligence, price, and supply assurance.
Perfect. Jinty.
So I gotta tell you, when we were extremely short-staffed during the dot-com bust, as well as the 2008 financial crisis, procurement people just were in the process of amending agreements and making sure that we were in compliance, rather than having that relationship management with the customer, the three-legged stakeholder, the customer and procurement. And we saw the pitfalls of it, because the customer was never happy with the quality, with timely delivery. And also when it came time for renewals, then there was massive types of complaints. We don't want this vendor. And in the public procurement process, it took a long time to do the solicitation and find new suppliers. So about 6 years into my role as the head of procurement, we brought in marketing people into procurement, which is sort of unusual in the public sector, and had supplier relationship management as part of the procurement function, where we had groups of every quarter have vendors come in and talk to us in person or virtually, and have this dialogue between the customer and the vendors, and what challenges they face, because it's a lot of work to do business with government, because we are so regulated, right? So that win-win situation actually brought in more customer satisfaction, and vendors got paid on time. At one point, I remember on a pharmaceutical contract, we had a $10 million payment because of our late payments to the suppliers. But when they were in financial crisis, and our controller didn't want to have that much money, given out, and having that risk associated with public monies, we made sure that we brought in ACH, and we brought in 3-day payment methods for a $400 million contract at the County of Santa Clara, thereby getting better payments and utilizing technology and better resources, right? So that goes to say, irrespective of which commodity you're doing or which industry you're at, supplier relationship is very important, and having them engaged not only with the customer but the supplier. They are partners to make it happen, and we are the liaisons to engage in those activities to make it a success.
So being a liaison, I actually put you in a leadership role. And so
Yes.
You all have great backgrounds, and regardless if you're the only person in your department, you are leading groups. You're leading groups either directly if they report into you, and you're engaging and influencing others to be a part of what you're trying to do for the organization. So from that leadership side, how do you communicate the what's in it for me to those team members and stakeholders? And again, this is open to anyone.
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at it. From what we do here is we have 3 business segments and 3 business segment presidents, and we do quarterly report outs by functions of what's going on in the company. So we keep them involved, and I meet on a regular basis through the councils that feed back into their organizations. So that's our basic communication process back into the business to make sure they're all aware of what's going on. And I can say, even with that, it's still under communicated. I mean, we just don't have enough hours in the day to reach everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll jump on that. Look, I think you've got to understand what procurement, not what procurement does, not what sourcing does, but what procurement brings to your stakeholders. And Dicey, I think, asked the question in the comments, or mentioned it in the comments. And fundamentally, it's about having empathy for your internal stakeholders and what they're getting out of you. We, as a procurement organization, there's really 4 functions we bring to the organization: compliance, cost savings, risk, and innovation. And depending on which stakeholder you're dealing with, you're bringing something different to that conversation, and you've got to understand what their needs are. So if you're dealing with, say, R&D or marketing, they don't care about risk. They care about innovation. If you're dealing with the CEO, it's actually risk first, cost savings second. And if they're heavily revenue generating focused, it's going to be innovation. If it's the CFO, it's going to be cost savings first, and then maybe compliance or risk. And so you've got to understand the position of your stakeholder, and then what of the four aspects that you bring to the organization do you want to present to that particular stakeholder, and what do you want to pivot your conversation around?
Appreciate that. So I'm gonna, just kind of shift a little bit. So when we talk about, again, 2020, and we've been talking about more so COVID and other impact. Now I want to shift to the social unrest element of 2020, and really specifically supplier diversity, and that's the profession that I'm in. How has supplier diversity, or really the impact of 2020 and the increase in understanding and desire to build supplier diversity programs, how has that impacted procurement? Has it always been there, in your opinion? Do you see a difference in terms of how it's integrated into a procurement process? What is that for you? Jeffrey, we'll start.
And I actually was going to wait on this one, because when you talk about procurement, and I look at it from a much larger piece, but I think that what 2020 has brought us is another definition to how we measure supplier diversity. Of late, over the past number of years, we think of supplier diversity as women-owned business, minority-owned business, small business with revenue under this, businesses that might employ the physically challenged or mentally challenged. And what the past 18 months have shown us is that's one piece of supplier diversity. The other is supplier diversity with, I'm buying from company A today. Company A has a problem. Who's company B? Where am I going to go to when my goods are stuck in a port, or my service provider is unwilling to take ACH payments, using Brent's example, and I realize that's not a way that I can run my business. It's not cost effective enough. So I think the past period of time has shown us supplier diversity really is a multi-headed animal.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love it. Anyone else?
I've got a bit of an interesting story on this one, and it was a shock to me. So a number of years ago, I was working in the energy industry, and the company I was working for bought someone else, and so that other company was doing $1 billion of sales to the federal government, both through the GSA and the Department of Defense. And so suddenly, overnight, we went from really almost no government business to a significant percentage of our revenue was associated with the federal government. And so we suddenly now needed to comply with the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR, and the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, the DFAR. And part of that is supplier diversity in the categories that Jeffrey just mentioned. And I think as I delved into it in the organization and had to put this program in place for procurement, what really came to me was a lot of what you need to do to make your supply chain more diverse is against some of the basic premises that procurement operates under. So it's hard to consolidate your suppliers to one small business or two small businesses. It's hard to extend your payment terms to 60 days when you're dealing with small businesses that can't get bank loans. They need to have a 10 or 15 day payment term to make them successful. they can't be a significant percentage of your business because they can't handle the revenue shock as you go up and down. And so as a procurement leader, I don't think we can lead the conversation about making our supply chain more diverse. I think we have to facilitate that conversation for the company. And the company needs to either decide we're going to go that way or we're not for whatever reason. And then within procurement, it's our role to facilitate that. And there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of opportunities to do it. But we need to change our mindset. We have to become much more flexible because kind of the basic best practices in many cases are going to be inverse to making our supply chain more diverse.
I love that. Brent or Genty, any additional comments on this topic?
Well, I go back when I was in automotive. There was a guy named Dave Bing out of Detroit that got in the steel business and grew the business. And for him to keep growing, he had to become a public company. So all of a sudden, you had a minority supplier, so to speak, that was doing great things, but he grew big enough that he no longer became a minority supplier. So I would call that a great success story. But when you look at your metrics as a company, you just took a huge jolt to your system when he outgrew the program. So, the same thing happened in the corrugated business with Oscar Robertson, a famous basketball player again. He grew that up and he ended up getting folded into International Paper. So it's great to see these entrepreneurial minorities grow businesses and be successful, but sometimes can be a detriment. So, totally support those things. And we're actually doing some of that here in Cleveland. And it's through, I can't think what the Cleveland entity is that does it, but it's part of the city government that helps build suppliers and connects them with businesses to be able to help support and grow them. And they do help them financially, to Brent P's point that, if they're not able to get the financing they need, the city in this case is helping them out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that perspective.
Yeah, I'll just say, as a supplier diversity professional, really the only detriment is when those businesses don't go out and hire, especially in underserved communities, because it's the American dream to build a business big enough where somebody else is interested in you and they buy you out. So from that perspective, it's always great to see the growth from there. Genty, anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, when I was at the county, we had this business of 37,000 suppliers. At any given time, we had like 15,000 suppliers because we had a very large budget. And most often, we didn't have as many socioeconomic factors as the federal government or other public entities. But we always wondered if small businesses would be able to handle the bandwidth of the county's flow of needs and delivery of goods and services. And we were sort of impatient because the public procurement process took a long time. So very late in the game, we got involved in socioeconomic factors such as small businesses and minority businesses and stuff. But pretty much that was more in focus with following the rules. But in the back end, I got to say, I don't know how many public sector people are watching, but really we did not have results because when it came through, we had factors to select vendors who we were able to manage the risk better and not give them an opportunity. So now that 49ers, we have the SBE, small business enterprise policies that we want to follow to give vendors an opportunity. And I'm beginning to think how I can inculcate that stakeholder communication and meetings so we can explain to them that there's an opportunity to do business, because I'm just learning the supplier base at the 49ers. So what you guys are talking right now, I think I can take up some of these opportunities to do some interesting items in the 49er group. Yeah.
So again, we can talk forever on many topics here, but we definitely want to close it out. And so the last question I have is an open question. And really, what does procurement look like, the future of procurement look like for all of you? We've seen the transformation over the last 18 months, and we know that there's more coming. There's always paradigm shifts when you have crises. But for all of you, what does procurement look like in the future?
So as the non-procurement person, well, I'm going to keep saying that. Part of it, I think, is being able to look into the future and draw conclusions and forecast where we think the market's going, where we think pricing is going, where we think component, product, service availability is going. We need to understand. I saw a comment someone made about does procurement need to be technical? It helps, but I think what really the supply chain procurement team needs is the ability to go to an individual or a team that they trust to say, okay, we just got this bid back. Here's the bill of materials, or here's the service terms. Would you take a look and see if what they are quoting us makes sense?
I'm gonna. Sorry. Okay. I'll jump in on this. Look, I think I said it a couple minutes ago. Procurement has that 4 functions. Compliance, cost savings, risk, and innovation. We've heard it a little bit in today's conversation. I don't know if any of you have read Eloise Epstein's latest book, but she says it best. Our functions over-index to cost savings. And if we don't change that, we're going to revert to where we were pre-COVID. COVID is given us an interesting and exciting opportunity to change our position in the organization, but we need to embrace that. And that is not easy. Cost savings is a really easy way to justify the existence of the department. Hey, I'll bring you an extra $1 million if you give me $400,000 in payroll. Everyone signs up for that. But that's hard. The crutch of compliance, again, it's easy. It's making someone else do the work for us and mandate our use, but people don't want to engage with us. The value we bring is risk and innovation. The hard thing is selling our function based on risk and innovation is a new conversation. It's a new language. It's new stakeholders and it's new partners. And our leaders within procurement, our CPOs and our senior procurement staff need to change the language that we use to justify our existence. We need to change and embrace new partners in the organization. And that's hard to do. But if we can do it, we'll have a much more important role in the organization. Risk and innovation is what drives us at the most senior levels in the company. And that's where we really need to focus going forward.
We've been talking about for a while the procurement function having a seat at the C-level table, and I think a lot of companies are seeing that now. But now it's getting the support of the business president leadership group that is supporting you and driving those initiatives back down the organization. It's great to start things with the councils and bring them up through, but you got to have the support from on top. And I think that's a change that I've seen come out of COVID, because we're in an inflationary period right now. And so saying cost savings is going to justify your existence is not, it's managing all those processes that Brent P. spoke about and having those understood and what value you bring that way. I really think, the piece price days are over. It's managing the total cost of ownership.
Talking about procurement and cost savings is like talking about finance and saying somebody's good in accounting or numbers. It goes without saying that when you procure, whether it's with your public funds or private funds, you do a good job. So I think the overarching transformation or transcend procurement discussion in the industry is we are business drivers. We are an integral part of an organization, and it's a function that is going to support the vision, mission, and values of an organization, whether it's a private P&L versus a public sector where you're serving the constituents of a organization. We have to change the way we talk about engagement or empowerment, cost savings and stuff, and discuss ourselves in a different fashion where we don't bring ourselves into these categories of technical skills or interpersonal skills and say, you don't talk to a CEO that way, you don't talk to a CFO that way, you don't talk to a CIO that way. It all comes as a package deal. So we need to address ourselves. So switching industries from public sector to the sports and entertainment, I'm seeing that even more. What does procurement do? There was a joke about Genti and her 3 quotes because a public sector required 3 freaking quotes. And I got them, I got something that was purchased for $100,000 at 42% off. Of course, the CFO was happy because we're going to save money, but what's the quality like, right? And how do we engage? Is the customer happy with this? So I think in all of us, we leaders here have to change this, even how we approach in this discussion, including Dr. Louise and everybody. I think we dummy down our profession by putting all of these factors that we have to switch our model. You don't talk to finance people that way. You don't talk to IT people that way. The industry changes from, all of the newer technologies and stuff, but we don't talk about people. So I hope, Sarah, in our next future, sessions in the future, you talk about how we change the way, how we transcend. There's no trade-off here. Cost savings versus innovation versus empowerment versus influence. What do we do in the industry to take a different approach so we are not segmented into these categories of, because procurement has so many different segments that you could be experts at, whether it's in negotiations or logistics or warehousing or cost negotiations or legal aspects and administration, right? So within this, each of us, if we were to put the 4 speakers today or the 4 panelists today, we'll learn a lot from each other because we are from different categories of contracting and procurement and contracting functions. So the same applies to everybody who's listening, right? So we take a bit of it and we move it forward. But together, if you have to enhance the profession in places like Procurement Foundry or the NIGP or any type of associations, I think our model of communicating who we are has to really change. And I'm hoping to see some of these new panelists who come on board can address that and we all participate in the future.
I love it. Again, it's been an honor for me. I've learned a lot. I was writing down a lot. So thank you for allowing me to be able to moderate this panel. So again, I'll turn it over to Sarah, but thank you.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Lamont very much for moderating our panel today. He's an awesome leader in the supplier diversity space. So if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend reaching out and connecting him with him on LinkedIn. I'd like to thank Jeffrey, Brent V, Brent P, and Genti. All of them are incredible thought leaders, very strategic and visionaries in the industry. Again, feel free to reach out and connect with them on LinkedIn, follow their work and some of the cool things that they're doing. And my favorite hashtag of the year, which I always like to close out with, is making procurement cool. Our industry is awesome and cool, and make sure we make that known to the world. So if you enjoyed the conversation today, our next procurement talk will be September 14th, 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time. We're loving our new LinkedIn format, and we'll be continuing this on for the rest of the year. So hopefully you can join us. And with that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.